Welcome to Navigating Education, the podcast. The podcast that can help educators from around the world navigate not only the present, but also the future. Through discussions of instruction, EdTech, policy, and school leadership, we're here to connect with you and educators from around the world to help them amplify student learning for the betterment of our students and their future. Alrighty, good evening, everyone. We are here for episode 38 of season 2 of Navigating Education, the podcast. And tonight, I have a special guest, Stephanie Howell, who is basically a technology instructional coach from Ohio, and she has produced some amazing supports and resources for teachers that are using them across the world, and it has made a major impact. So I wanted to sit down and talk to her this evening about, what she's currently working on, what's kind of the trends that she feels like that's working for her in her work in her district, as well as with teachers across the country and the world, and just narrowing it down on some tools, some strategies, so that we can help support your practice. And it's really interesting that her and I are in very similar roles. So it's going to be a great conversation talking about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and how we can make an impact to our teachers and our students. So thank you so much for being here tonight, Stephanie.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk with you. I enjoyed our pre-chat that we had earlier. So I cannot wait to share some more information and learn from you as well.
Yeah, for sure. And let's jump into getting to know you a little bit better for our audience and our listeners. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and, what's your background in education and how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah. So again, my name's Stephanie, and a little bit about myself. Let's see here. I have a son. He's 2. He is crazy, very strong-willed child that doesn't give up. He's very determined, which can be a challenge at times. But I think when he gets older, it'll be a good thing, right? Or at least that's what I keep telling myself. And then how I got started in education. So I actually hated school. I was a student that had dyslexia, and I was diagnosed in the 2nd grade with a learning disability because they never really named it dyslexia. And so in 2nd grade, I really struggled with school because the learning was direct instruction. The teacher taught from the front of the room. There were no small groups. It was very much, if it was independent work, there wasn't a whole lot of EdTech support because the internet was just kind of being invented by that time. And so again, I kind of went through school and I didn't really enjoy it. It was really difficult for me until my senior year of high school. And it was actually started around my junior year of high school. I started volunteering in the MD classroom. So these students had multiple disabilities, and I met them through my gym class. They were included in my gym class. That was like part of their inclusion time and their social skills, and fell in love with these students. We became really good friends, and I started volunteering in their classroom as a peer model. And that's when I found out I had to go to school for education because I realized that I could have somewhat of a difference in these students' lives that struggled with school and had all these different disabilities. So I went to school for education or special education, and I graduated, and I did not get that dream multiple disabilities job that I wanted. I actually got in a job where I was helping students with learning disabilities, which brought back some pain points in my own life of having that own disability. And when my students really struggled, I started to see how the education system was failing them. I noticed that, we were teaching direct instruction. And so that Christmas break, as a first-year teacher, I went home. I got on Pinterest. I found this thing called Google Classroom, and I started to implement it in my classroom. And I saw the amazing results that my students started to have. And these were students that really struggled with reading. They struggled with spelling. They struggled with getting their ideas out there on paper, their organization of writing, all of these different things were a huge struggle for these students. But because of Google Classroom, and Google Classroom looked crazy back in 2014, and it does now. And they were able to have spell check. They weren't having me over their shoulder reading them something. They could actually listen to the computer. And it was an awful voice back in 2014 compared to today. And so my students really started to excel. And I saw all of this growth just from using a little bit of EdTech. And I was that crazy teacher. I was like, we're only using Google Classroom on Fridays because I was afraid that engagement would go away. I was afraid that they would use it in like crazy ways. So I was like, okay, it's just a Friday activity. And every day they would ask me to use it every single day. And I was like, no, it's just for Fridays. Like, we can't use it every day. I was like scared of like losing this excitement, which led me into using it every single day with my students, teaching them the executive functioning skills that they needed to be successful, and teaching them the advocating skills that they needed that I didn't have. My mom had to advocate for me a lot of times when I was in school. So that's kind of how I got to where I am. I saw the purpose in EdTech, applied for the EdTech coaching position because I was really interested in helping adults transform their classroom to help every single student. So now I help students who are gifted all the way to students who are MD or have those multiple disabilities, and everyone in between. So it's crazy. It's fun. I love my job.
No, that's funny. It seems like we started using Google Classroom about the same time. So I definitely enjoyed listening. It gave me some nostalgia back in the day of using Google Classroom when the functionality wasn't it was kind of clunky, kind of like maybe Canvas like nowadays or whatever. But I mean, I feel that it's come a long ways. And I like how you use that tool as, you kind of sequenced your way to it over time. Is like, generally you're trying a tool, you dib and dab a bit and then see how some strategies work. Do the kids enjoy it? Is it meeting our learning goals? And then you're like, okay, well, what else can I do with it? And you can see over time that, hey, this is great. And it becomes more of that mainstay in your classroom. And I think that as instructional coaches and technology integrations, I think that's kind of puts a target on exactly what we're doing every day. And I noticed that we have Samantha joining in, and thanks for the comments, Samantha. So it's really interesting. Similar pathways as me, being in the classroom and then moving into this role. So I want to jump into, that role specifically. And can you talk a little bit about, what are some tools and strategies that you're using? I mean, I want you to talk a little bit about, what's working right now for teachers in your experience in your district, as well as what you're seeing, across maybe North America right now.
Yeah, there's all kinds of different tools that we're using, and I feel like it varies from teacher, depending on what kind of students they have in their classroom. We're a district that's really focused on personalized learning. So what that means is we're kind of focusing on blended learning, and that would be the strategy that we're using. So every student kind of took an increase of technology online during COVID with playing their video games, having to have instruction, videos, all that kind of stuff went more online. And so now we're kind of pulling back to that blended learning model. So where some students are working in a collaborative group, other students are meeting with their teacher. Some students are on the computer, maybe learning from iReady or Edpuzzle or completing some type of activity on the computer. And then usually there's an independent practice type of station. So that can be done. It depends again on the classroom and the comforter level of the teacher. Some teachers are doing station rotation, and we've got our kindergarteners doing station rotation as well. It's really fun to go in and just watch those kids have a choice board or do station rotation so young. And then more in the middle schools, we're doing a lot of different playlists. We're doing roadmaps. We're doing game boards. So it's more self-paced. And I just helped a teacher today. We made 3 different roadmaps that are all differentiated. And we're going to put them in Google Classroom, and they're going to be assigned to different students based on their data. So really looking over that data and deciding, okay, what do these students need? But it does take time. to build your students up. So usually we start with station rotation, and then we move to more of a self-paced type of model. As the students learn the procedures, as they gain some of those executive functioning skills, such as like ownership and learning to set goals and how to advocate if they need help, because you can't just throw them in there. It's kind of a process to teach those skills. And then adding those choice boards in there as well for students to have some choice in the way that they learn. So that is kind of like our model for teachers. And I feel like every August it starts back, even though you might be a pro at blended learning, just because your kids aren't. So getting them retrained and kind of doing that restart. So some EdTech tools that we we definitely use all the Google products. Samantha calls me the Google princess. That's what she told me. So we definitely use a lot of Google Slides, Google Sheets to track data and track student progress. We have a lot of like self-pacing trackers for students to check off where they are. And then also like Edpuzzle is a big one, so we can kind of see how students are doing. We have Hapara to monitor students on their Chromebooks if we need to send out any links or anything like that. Edulastic is another. We have a lot of stuff. But again, it's picking the right tool for your standard. What are you teaching? And then what tool is going to help best get you there? And sometimes it's not tech. And so that's okay. But sometimes it is tech. And so I feel like I am more of that blended learning. So like you don't have to use tech all the time. You can kind of mix it both together.
Yeah, no, I really like that, you're focused on, the strategy, station rotation, and then, scaffolded, personalized learning, what you're talking about with those roadmaps. And it all comes down to, this being successful is not really it's not the tool. It's essentially the routines and strategies that you're using to implement, and, that basically get your students having those digital and in-person routines so that they can implement station rotation is, that takes time. And, at the beginning of each year, you need to dedicate, 3 to 4 weeks just to building those routines in, and then continue to work on them as you go. But what's nice is with a lot of this stuff that you're talking about, especially with these tools, is that once you build a lot of the stuff, then you don't really need to change a whole lot throughout the year. You're just tinkering. So that's really nice. And I think just when you mentioned like a lot of these products from Canva to Edulastic to Google, is that, you don't need more than like 3 to 5 of these things. And if you build the stuff, then, it's going to really be long lasting, and you can just refine it over time. So I think that a lot of people think that like, oh, it's a lot of work. But if you do that work front load, then it's going to be a lot less over time. And it's going to be, in terms of your workflow and efficiency, then it's going to just make it, I think, a lot easier. Maybe this is the type of person I am, but I like to do things, front loading it versus back loading it. So those are just some of my thoughts. So let's jump into the next question, just talking a little bit about the coaching piece now. And right now it's really difficult because, well, a lot of teachers are, I think 2021-22 school year has been the hardest year ever in terms of just the nature of where we're currently at with the expectations and demands of teachers and just the climate that we're in. And I think that a lot of that has to deal with is that the world has essentially changed and the demands of the job have changed, but a lot of the nature of teaching hasn't caught up or changed, or like this notion of like a 5-day school week and you'd be in seats all day and whatnot. And it's just kind of just caused a lot of, pressure, burnout, etc. And really coaching in this environment is extremely difficult because of just the nature of just when you're tired, you don't want to really listen to anyone, or you don't really want to do anything. So I'm very curious as to what's kind of working with you right now, and how are you implementing that in your coaching and building that capacity?
Yeah. So one thing you kind of touched on earlier when we were talking about strategies was creating those like activities you can do over and over again. So I like to call those like my rinse and repeat strategies, where teachers have a template and there's not much on the template. It might just have a direction, A lot of times these are edu protocols that we like to use here too. And again, you just reuse them. So that has been really helpful during my coaching with teachers, is just kind of telling them, hey, reuse them. Some successes, especially if you're just starting out coaching, is build those relationships. Once you have teachers that trust you and know that you're not going to judge them, that's like the biggest thing. You cannot judge your teachers. You need to keep your information confidential. If you are going to share something, do not share names. Like that is my biggest like thing, is like when I hear coaches and they tell me like a name or something like that, it's like a red flag. Because no one wants to like know like, hey, this person's talking really bad about me or whatever. Like they're sharing something really personal with you that they're trying to improve on. Keeping that relationship confidential, and then also sticking up for the teacher and thinking they know what's best for their students and they're doing the best that they can at that moment. So that are just some like beginning tips. Also with that, the follow-up piece. When I first started coaching, I would suggest a new strategy to a teacher, and then I would offer, hey, have you thought about that strategy? Can I come in and help? Have you implemented it? Do you need maybe some extra templates or resources, or did that go wrong and do you want to see it like just following up with the teacher? And what I would do is I would put that in my calendar. So I would meet with the teacher, and then about 2 weeks after, I would put a note in my calendar that just said, check in with this teacher. She was interested in this activity. See if she tried it, see if she even looked at it. And so that really helped build my my teachers up too. And so now I've been coaching for 5 years, which is crazy, I feel like. And I have teachers that want to meet with me every single week. And so once you have those relationships and they know that they can trust you and they can share anything with you, you're going to get on their schedules. You're going to be super busy. Like now I think I'm overly busy. And it's really fun though, because you're focusing on something different every single year. So like with one teacher, it was like station rotation our first year. Well, now that teacher is at like a self-paced classroom, students are doing different things, and it's fun to see that growth and really reflect on it. But again, that follow-up piece is huge, and just following the coaching cycle. So the coaching cycle, I follow Google's coaching cycle. I really like their outline that they have in the coaches program. So it's finding that problem. So it's not my problem, it's the teacher's problem. So going to the teacher and just being like, what issues are you facing in education? And really working with them and feeling their pain points, because they are dealing with it. And I think sometimes as a coach, you forget what it's like to be a teacher, because I mean, I have been out for 5 years that I don't remember all the parent phone calls you have to make. I don't remember the behaviors. I don't remember all this. And so really just listening to the teacher and their pain points, and kind of telling them like, yeah, I get it. Or even coming in to observe them, to see their pain. And then after that, kind of researching different ways that you can help them is the next step. And then, go ahead.
I was just saying is that I think that, I mean, you have to find something that they really want to work on, and they have to make it like personal. And then if you really connect it to their students, and to me, that is the key of, exerting that interest. And then, like you said, I really liked how you said that just over time, if you continue to work with that teacher, then that relationship builds and you get busier and busier and busier as a result of more and more people wanting you. So that's all I wanted to say. I just think I think the relationship piece and really following up, going into classrooms, be willing to co-teach, and vouch for that teacher too, and have the attitude to say we're not focusing on negatives right now or areas of improvement. We're just focused on right now. We want to grow together, and we want to grow together in this. And that's kind of, to me, my MO. And hopefully, we don't focus on the deficit piece at all.
Yeah. And I think too, sometimes coaches get out of teaching and I've heard them be really judgmental. And you can't be, because they're fighting the fight and they are in the front lines of these kids. And so after you kind of work with the teacher and research a different strategy, you come back together and you plan what is that going to look like. After that, you implement, and that's that co-teaching piece. And co-teaching can look very, very different.
Okay.
So I came from a spec ed background. So co-teaching to me was normal. I was an inclusion teacher who co-taught 3 classes every single day with the same teacher. It was amazing. And that teacher, we did a lot of, sometimes I would lead the class. If you walked in our classroom, you would have no idea who the spec ed teacher was or who the reg ed teacher was. And that's how I wanted it. But I think sometimes it is me modeling and the teacher's watching and helping. Then maybe the next class, the teacher's leading it and I'm helping. Sometimes we're team teaching and we're both teaching together. Sometimes she's at a station, I'm at another station. Like it can look so different depending on what the teacher needs. But if you don't do that planning together, it can fail. Like I've been there. It fails. I'm like, oh yeah, we'll just come in, like we'll wing it. Don't wing coaching. Always go with the teacher, plan with them, decide, okay, what are we going to do? What is the goal of this lesson? What are the standards we're focusing on? Develop the plan, develop the agenda. And then you can go in, and it's even sometimes helpful if you say, I'll do this, you do that during this lesson. Or, hey, I want you to watch how I'm doing this. Or, hey, I want you to watch this student. And there are some times where I build relationships with students to get in with some of those harder teachers, like those behavior kids. I somehow attract them for some reason. But it really helps getting to know that teacher, because I can sometimes be that PBIS reward for those students or whatever they need. And then after that, it's the reflection piece. And again, that reflection piece often gets left out, but it's so important. And it doesn't have to just be a quick meeting with a teacher. It can be a walk and chat. It can be a phone call. It can be a text. But that reflection piece of, okay, how's it going? What do you want to do next? Is there any new challenges? And usually they're ready for another coaching cycle in about a week or two because of that follow-up and reflection piece.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think that for everyone just thinking about, when we were incorporating this new strategy or in this new tool, what went well, what were some areas of improvement, how are students responding to this? Did we spend enough time building these routines or not? How did, what did the outcomes look like? What did the data look like? And then, moving forward and determining, what's our next step. I mean, that's huge. And for me, to be honest, that's, in my current role, is that this is year 1 in that role. And I need to focus more on that reflection piece and sequencing it. But I think from where I'm at, I'm still building kind of the program. So that's something that hopefully I can work on, towards the end of this year in probably May, June, and then moving into the next school year. But that's a great piece that I think that we can't miss on. Even also too, not even just the one-on-one coaching, but for the professional development series that you're doing and that type of work as well. Because if we're not focused on that reflection piece, then, what are we doing? Do we know, if we're improving or not? Right. So, So let's talk a little bit. I know that we talked about, your district does a lot of blended learning, but is there a specific strategy that you like to integrate with a tool? I've really been on the Kagan cooperative learning bandwagon with a lot of these tools. For example, Google Slides. I love the strategy Think, Write, Pair, Share with Google Slides, or for example, Pear Deck or Nearpod or whatever you're using. But is there a strategy that you really like using with a specific tool that is like a really like go-to for you?
Yeah, I feel like right now, my focus has been on executive functioning skills. And I don't know why, but our student behavior has increased this past school year like crazy. And it's a skill that students need to learn how to have. They need to have this skill to do life. They need to have these skills to be in the classroom. And so I've been working really closely with our behavior specialist, Tara Ruckman, and then also Ashley Neuschwander, who's the teacher that's actually implementing these crazy ideas. So what we've been doing is during Ashley's morning meetings is we've been focusing on a different executive functioning skill. We first started off by giving the students a Google form that Louise helped create, and it like auto scores the kids' information to all these different executive functioning areas. So we knew where to start and what was going to be most critical for these students to really help their behavior change and for them to be successful in blended learning. So we started to realize that blended learning was a struggle for a lot of teachers. And it was because the students were struggling with the motivation. They were playing games. They were off task. They were just idle sitting there. And so we started with goal setting. So what Ashley did is she used Fast and Curious. So Fast and Curious is an edu protocol which deals with repetition. So we were secretly doing some metacognition stuff, but also some goal setting. So students took their scores and they saw their improvement over time. They became so obsessed with their data that these kids started to set goals for different assessments, and they wanted to see how they did on their tests, especially in math. So they were on Edulastic. They have a lot of different assessments in there. And these kids would set goals, and they immediately wanted the teacher to turn on the feedback so they could self-assess and see how they were doing. I don't know any sixth grader that really wants to do that without Ashley kind of planting those seeds. Yeah, secret planning. I love that, Samantha.
No, and I like that you're focusing on executive function. And I think that in America right now, specifically, right now, in terms of what we're seeing in K-12 with the behaviors and the why, there's a lot of reasons why, but I think that we haven't focused a lot on executive functioning, not generally that was always geared towards students with special needs historically, but really I think that what we learn most in school is probably executive functioning more than content and skill, because you need executive functioning to do those things. And I feel like that we've really lacked really good curriculum and just ways of incorporating it into the classroom. And I think the goal setting piece, and then just really drilling down those goal setting with just basic routines, even just to do a few things. And I think that the idea of sharing student data with students regarding their progress in a very productive way where that reflection takes place is something that I think should be done more, because a lot of times when, for example, even assessment data, even in behavior data, that's never shared to students. And I think that's game changing if you can create an environment where that is, okay for students and they feel comfortable and it's done in a way that is, productive for them. So that's really cool. And I think that we need to shift the conversation nationally to want to do that type of work, because I think that's what's needed.
Yeah, it's been really cool. And just like you said, a lot of those really good strategies that Hattie suggests, like cooperative learning. Well, if you can't work in a group, and I mean, this year I've seen kids be so nasty during group work. They're arguing, they're fighting, they're blaming other people. I've even heard kids, I don't want to work with you. And you can't respond like that. And we have to teach them. And that is executive functioning, is that behavior piece of learning response and learning how to kind of react when working with others. And so I really think that's where we are struggling right now. So just focusing on that. And if your students are really bad at group work, you can't give up on it. You've got to get them practicing, because if you're not practicing it, they're going to continue to be bad at it. And that's a skill that they need in today's society. I mean, I work with groups all of the time, and there's people I don't like, but I've got to learn to work with them.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that this idea of executive functioning, I mean, it rolls right into SEL, emotional intelligence, all these things kind of wrap. And I think that we really got to be intentional with, a lot of these things. And I think that we need to really shift our conversation, at least where we're currently at, about, there's a lot of talk about learning laws, content and skills, but why don't we just get back to focusing on executive functioning, emotional intelligence, social emotional learning, all that stuff will come back. We can get really good at, working on content and everything else later on. I mean, that stuff's a lot easier versus this type of stuff that we're talking about. This is in the trenches type work. So definitely I want that conversation to shift towards that, because that's what the kids really need. And that's what the students need across board, even adults as well. So let's jump into the second to last question, though. I know there's so many tools out there this year, and it feels like there's a new one every day. Currently for you personally, maybe this is not something you're doing with your teachers all the time, but what is your favorite go-to tool right now?
My favorite go-to would have to be Canva and Google Slides. I like to find different backgrounds in Canva because I think things need to be visually appealing for some students. And then using it with Google Slides to make it interactive. So that is my go-to one. Also, good Pear Deck is a good tool that we can use. Video like Screencastify, anywhere where we can get the kids creating is another, like WeVideo or them creating podcasts in WeVideo, Flipgrid. I mean, those are really good EdTech tools too, but I like to provide choice when I'm using those kind of things as well. So do you want to create a video or do you want to create a poster? Like, you get to choose what you want to do. You can also pick the tool because I don't care which tool you use. I just want you to focus on the content.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you're alluding to is essentially you're tool agnostic until it meets your goal, right? You're going to select a tool that's going to meet that goal, right? And we want that for our students and teachers. And I've been really jumping on the Canva bandwagon and using a lot, building the templates and putting it into slides or Jamboard or an interactive slide. I mean, because there's so many different strategies that you can incorporate into, these, I call them interactive slides. There's so many different ones that you could categorize, but I think that those are some of the most powerful tools, especially for, engaging students, cooperative learning, in problem solving. But I think, I mean, to be honest, I don't know how long you've been using Canva, but I feel like Canva has really exploded over the last 12 months.
Yeah, and I was pretty upset about the EdTech Madness bracket. I don't know if you were watching, but Canva, that hurt.
I know they got close. I mean, I feel like they got to the final, right?
Yeah, I was hoping they would get farther.
I know. I was surprised, to be honest, given just the upward momentum that they've had. So, but yeah, I think a lot of people have been going on the Canva bandwagon and taking a lot of that content there and integrating that into a lot of different things. So that's pretty cool. So before we go, what are 2 or 3 practical tips that you would suggest for all educators right now to amplify their practice? What would you give them right now to help them navigate now?
My first one would be building those relationships with your students, with colleagues, with pretty much whoever you can, focusing on those executive functioning skills because they really will help you and your students. And then building that PLN, get on Twitter, get on whatever social media, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you can, and DM someone that you don't know because you're going to learn something from them. And even if it's just a quick thank you for what they share, because there's a lot of educators out there that give a lot of their time and resources, and they're underappreciated. So even if it's just a thank you, you're going to build that connection. You're going to build your network that way, and then fail forward. Try new things. It's okay if you fail, as long as you get back up and you keep on going.
Yeah, no, those are great. I encourage every student or teacher that I'm working with to join EduTwitter and try and build their PLN. And it's great to learn from everyone locally, but also having that global network where you can go back and forth between what you're learning in your local area and what is going on globally. I mean, that there's just so much that's out there, and you can open your eyes to, new ideas and different things that you can incorporate. And I just like what you mentioned on the relationship piece. I think it all comes down to what you mentioned is that connectedness and the relationship piece. And that will get us through, all the challenges that we're currently in. So before we go, how can our listeners learn more about you and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, so feel free to follow me on Twitter. That's where I'm probably the most active. So I'm at Mrs. Howell 24 on Twitter. Feel free to send me a DM if there's any questions you have after listening to this episode. And then also you can go to my website. It's goldedu.org. We do a lot of fun sessions with like make and take type stuff where we create together as a community. And then you get to take all of these different ideas that all these amazing educators design during the session. So those are really fun monthly sessions. And then also on the website are a bunch of different templates that I've made for blended learning. Like usually there's a lot of Google Slides that I share because that's how I create a lot of the different things. And then add the EdTech stuff into there and some of the paper activities as well.
Awesome. That's great. You're doing so much. You're making such an impact locally as well as globally. So I appreciate you being on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
To our listeners that are watching or viewing this later, you can follow me at mattrhodes1990 on Twitter, and go to my website, matthewrhodes.com, to rewatch the podcast, listen to previous episodes, and you can go on to Spotify, Google, Apple, all the major podcast players in about 3 to 4 days, and this will be up there. So we look forward to our next episode. And once again, thank you so much for being on tonight, Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you.